It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Kim Hammer Show here on 101.1 FM The Answer. And if you're watching live Facebook, we appreciate you joining. Just a couple housekeeping rules. Number one, you can go up to my website or to my Facebook. It's thekimhammershow.com. thekimhammershow.com. You can re-listen to this program today if you want to, or share it. Also go up there for any information. And if you'll keep up on the website, we post articles on a regular daily basis, things of interest. Some might light you up, some might make you smile, some might make you cry, and some might make you happy. So it's kind of a emotional roller coaster ride to get up there and see all the important information that we keep up on that website. And in fact, today we are going to be talking about the subject of crime and how it is affecting Arkansans and also spreading across the nation. And if you want to go up to the website, you'll be able to find some research articles that a good friend of mine, Laura, who's joined our research team, is helping me to find information to put up on the website to coincide with the shows. You can go up to thekimhammershow.com and you'll find that list of articles as far as the different topics that we're going to be talking about today related to crime. This show also will be out there on a podcast, whether you're on Spotify or any one of the other platforms. You can go out and you can find this show, and if you would, just share it away so that people will become regular followers of the Kim Hammer Show, and as always, appreciate you listening today. What is a hot topic today, because of the increasing rate of it, is crime and the way it's affecting citizens of the state of Arkansas, and also even if you travel to certain states, you might want to be a little bit leery about going to certain states just because of what's happening in other states that are more liberal than what we are. But unfortunately, it's also affecting conservative states. The good thing is that as a state that is run by conservatives, hopefully we have a different attitude of how to deal with it. And to that point, I have three guests in studio today. Joining us online is Sheriff John Montgomery from Baxter County, Sheriff Rodney Wright from Saline County, who is in studio today, and also joining us in studio is Cody Hiland, who is a former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Arkansas, also a former elected prosecutor. Faulkner County, right?
Yeah, 20th Judicial.
Right. Very good. All right, so first of all, gentlemen, thank you all for being on the Kim Hammer Show today.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. I've got a little bit of a guideline for us to kind of outline our thoughts, and want to get y'all's perspective because each one of you deal with it on the front line, whether you're out arresting people, you're running a department. I'm going to make this disclaimer, although anybody that's a regular listener knows this. I am pro 100% law enforcement. I know that there are some bad actors in law enforcement. There are bad actors in preachers. There's bad actors in schools. There's bad actors in the radio business. Everybody's got their fair share of bad actors, point acknowledged. But overall, I'm 100% behind law enforcement because without law, we don't have a civilized society. So just that disclaimer, if that offends you, go listen to some other radio station. However, we need to get an understanding. That's why I wanted y'all in as our guests today. We need to get an understanding of what it's like from the various positions that you represent, both you and John, Rodney as sheriffs, you, Cody, as a former prosecutor, also as a former U.S. attorney. You've got some national, connections there. So we want to talk about, from your perspective, what y'all think needs to be done and what we need to be doing in order to get this crime situation under control. Crime occurrence in the U.S. Out in California, one of the articles is that California's growing crime crisis now includes organized retail crime, causing untold losses for a majority of retailers. And then you go on down and you look how that it's not just, your nickel and dime crimes anymore. Now it's taking another step up. So let me ask you, first of all, and each one of you weigh in on this, from your perspective, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And what do we need to be doing? I'm going to yield to my sheriff, Rodney Wright, and start with that, if you would.
Well, you just threw a lot at me at one time. I think it's going to start with getting the right people in the right political positions because we've got to move forward in the upcoming years. And I think what I mean by that is we've got to get another maximum security prison built. And I'll just start with that because you can't enact new laws to be harder on crime if you don't have a place to put them. Because currently, right now, the system is releasing violent criminals early so that we can put in violent criminals. And that's a problem. And, we talk about making laws harder or tougher. Well, that's good. But if you don't have a place to put them, it does no good to make these laws because then it just continues to back up in our county jails. Because right now, I think the last time I heard we were about 1,200 or 1,300 backed up in our county jails that needs to be in state prisons.
Well, and let me ask you, because I want to share the love today on the program. So let me take that real quick. And John, when Rodney talks about the backup in the county jails, explain to the people what that means and the ramifications that has on society as a whole.
Okay, and I totally agree with Rodney on this. The problem has occurred over the years, and currently in Baxter County, only about 25% of every person that stands up in front of a judge on felony charges will go to prison. That means 75% are released on probation. Of the 25% that do go, many times, and in fact a large majority of the times, they have been down multiple times in the past. Well, the problem is the prison's full. So when the judge sentences them to prison, let's just say 10 years, then there's no place to put them, so we have to hold them in our county jail. And so we have to continue to hold them until the prison calls and says, hey, we got room, bring them down. Well, it creates twofold problems. Number one, there's no room in our county jails to hold them. We're full. We're busting at the seams, the vast majority of us. Number two, it's a financial issue because the state currently pays us $32 a day to hold that inmate, but the average cost for me to hold an inmate is about $61 a day. So the counties are suffering and losing money from a financial end. As a result of all that backup, the pressure is put on to release inmates quicker from prison so that they can get them out of the county jail. And like Rodney said, you're releasing violent criminals so that you can put more violent criminals in. Again, he's right. You can't make laws tougher if there's no place to put them. And I will say this last thing real quick. We don't need to stop sending people to prison. We need to get people to change their behavior so that they don't go to prison.
All right, let me ask you, Cody, as a former U.S. Attorney and as a former prosecutor, you know, your job's put people in jail.
Correct.
So to what John and Rodney are talking about, how does that impact what you're able to do as a prosecutor, and how does that play into it?
Well, it's all connected, Senator. It's a situation where, you know, criminal justice is multifaceted. It relies on effective law enforcement, effective prosecutors doing their job, judges, juries, prisons. You know, it's all interconnected. So there's not one thing. There's several things. But I can tell you that, you know, the ability to know that when you send somebody down, they're going to be there. And I think John mentioned this. Was it 25-30% of the people that we prosecute actually go to prison? I think the last time we looked. And so you've got to work really hard in Arkansas to be sent to prison. So we've got, it's been said to me before, hey, where's your compassion? Well, look, we have drug court, we have veterans court, we have probation, we have SIS, we have sentencing pursuant to Act 346. I mean, you name it, there are diversionary programs out there, and they're used. So when we look at criminal justice, it's kind of a multi-leg stool, right? You have first-time offenders, people that get in trouble, and we have programs for them. You have, I would consider juvenile one of the big legs of the stool, which is almost an entirely different subject that has got to be addressed. But then you have violent repeat offenders. And I think these guys would probably agree with me that those are the bane of our existence when it comes to criminal justice. And so we have to be willing to address those. And really, your worldview matters as it relates to this. And so we have to be, we can't elevate wishful thinking to the status of legitimate public policy when it comes to these repeat violent offenders. We can't hope that they're going to get better. We've done that for years and years and years. And the DOJ recently, I think a couple of years ago, did a 9-year study on recidivism in the United States coming out of state prison. And they found that there was an 82% recidivism rate coming out of state prison. I mean, that is telling. And so what John and Rodney both have alluded to is there's no silver bullet here, but a starting point has to be capacity in our prisons, because without capacity, we can't address the parole eligibility, which I think is an issue, a problem. But again, the parole board is hampered by the capacity issue. And so that's, to me, that's a fundamental fix before we do anything else.
So when you talk about capacity, we just, with the governor's leadership, working together with the legislative branch, we've improved increasing the beds up, I think it's in Calico Rock. When you talk about prisons, I remember Tommy Robinson, his idea of prison. When you talk about prisons, you are kind of limited as far as what I think DOJ says you have to offer in the way of a prison and accommodations, things like that.
Yeah.
Are we talking prisons like county jail style? Or are we talking prisons when you say that what you think it's going to take? Are we talking maximum security like a Bricky or one of the other ones?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Is we need a maximum security prison. I think that a lot of people get caught up on, well, we don't want to send more. You're just trying to send more people there for forgery or theft. I think no, we're not. We are concentrating on the most violent people, and when we have to turn around and when I say we, the parole board has to turn around and release people so that we can put them in. That's a problem. And I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. The Sheriff's Association did with Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin on this very subject. And he agrees with us that we've got to do something. But, even he said it doesn't do any good to make laws tougher if you don't have a place to put them.
Yep.
And so, it was a good meeting with him. He's on board as well, that we need to move forward. We need to, that needs to be something that, Kim, that we talk to y'all, the state representatives and our senators, about what we're going to do for in the next couple of years. And I can tell you, in a personal, it's tough hearing that we've got a $1 billion surplus, and knowing what we need is a maximum security prison.
Capacity-wise, what do you think that maximum security ought to be? I mean, because we had a committee meeting here a couple of months ago, and they released the statistics. As far as what's projected to be the growth rate in crime over the next 10 years, I think it was like 10%. I think it was 10%, but it was a significant number. That could we build capacity enough to get out ahead of what the need is, and how soon would that maximum security fill up? Sidebar: if we did have a maximum security, would that turn that number down to where the deterrent would be out there among the criminals, that they know you get out here and do this, you're going to go away for a long time? And that's what I would try to rationalize, is between what it is currently projected to be, and what would any harder laws, punishment, maximum security do to turn that number down?
Well, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I have been in a meeting with Solomon Graves, who's the director over the prisons, and he has those numbers, and he'd be one to subject expert on that.
Right. Well, he was the one that was talking about, in that we may have been in the same meeting, that if we don't do anything, we're going to see a 10% increase in the future. So the question is, what do we got to do to turn that number down? You guys are throwing in the component, piece of the puzzle that says we need a maximum security. In y'all's professional opinion, if we had that maximum security prison, would that turn that number down, either by virtue of the fact you're locking them up, or it's the deterrent that the criminals on the street see that says, well, I'm not going to do this because I know there's room to lock me up?
Yeah, I mean, Kim, you'll have people tell you deterrence doesn't work, and I'll tell you that I think it absolutely does work. So when I came in as U.S. Attorney, Little Rock was on fire at the time, and so we tried to do what we could do, which is go after violent repeat offenders on the felon in possession law. And the difference between the state and the federal government is that at the federal level, we did not have parole. And so when we get these people with criminal histories as long as your forearm, and we get them on a possession of a weapon, I could give those people, I didn't, the jury or the judge, 5, 10, or 15 years, real years, to serve. And so that's compared to, at the state level, on a Class D felony, a maximum of 6 years, which they would serve at most 10, 11 months, because we've got a 1/6 parole eligibility, 1/3, 1/6. And so at the federal level, we didn't have that. And so when we started implementing that and taking those cases in volume, our caseload the first year, in 2018, increased 82%. And most of those were those felon in possession. We were targeting the worst, violent offenders, working with Little Rock PD, working with the sheriff's office, working with the prosecutor's office, taking the cases we could. At the end of that year, as a result of those partnerships, homicide in Little Rock went down 24%. Drive-by shootings went down 55%. Anecdotally, I got a text from the then chief Buckner about, I guess, October of that year saying, hey, please keep your foot on the gas. He said, our guys are rolling up behind known gangbangers. We're walking up to them, and they're saying, we're not riding hot. We don't want federal time. Now, why is it they don't want federal time? Because they knew that there was absolute risk of 5, 10, or 15 real years as opposed to, months at most. And so it's absolutely a deterrent. Now, you've got to do it right, and you've got to do it smart, and you can't overreach. But we have to start addressing that element, the repeat violent offenders, and get tough on them. But as these two guys have reiterated, you can't get tougher on it until you have additional capacity to be able to house them.
All right, John or Rodney, anything on that?
Well, and I totally agree with Cody on that. And I believe it is a deterrent. I've been doing this now for well over 30 years, and I can remember back in the early days, if you stopped someone and they were on parole, they would be begging you not to arrest them because they were scared to death of going back to prison. That deterrent is not there because they know that they're not going to serve that long. And I've had people argue, but I think this is a shock to your listeners, but if someone gets 6 years in prison, they probably will do about 4 to 6 months. That's it. They're out. They're on the street. And the sad part is, so they get out early and they're put on parole. And, of course, the purpose of parole is we're going to let you out early as long as you follow the rules. Well, if they break those rules, they have to break them numerous times before they go back to prison. My citizens up here are shocked to learn that when they go back a second time or third time, or in many cases, fifth or sixth time, you would think they would have to finish out their original sentence. Nope. Typically, they're down for 90 days, and then they're released.
So let me ask you, do we need to change the eligibility for parole, or in doing that, we're not really fixing the problem because, again, you don't have anywhere to put them or anywhere to keep them?
And that's part of the thing. Do we need to? The answer is yes, in my opinion. And again, there was a proposal back a few years ago to, again, repeat offenders. And Senator Hammer, you've heard me numerous times down in the legislature talking about repeat offenders, but you have to have a place to put them. And so, again, we've got to have more capacity because the pressure is on the parole board to let them out, because there's such a backlog of people waiting to go. And on one quick side note, keep in mind, currently there is about, and a lot of this is due to the COVID issues, but there's about 70,000 outstanding circuit court cases. If you use the 75-25 rule, and 75% of those are going to get probation, we don't have enough probation and parole officers to keep up with those that are let out. So you've got another side that we also are going to have to address, in my opinion.
You know, when you bring the subject up, when we talk about the subject of building a new prison and expanding it to create, the ability to house them, you have those that come out on the other side that say, no, we don't need more prisons. What we need are more mental health services. What we need are more support services. We need to do a better job in the prison of educating people so that when they come out, they can go get a job. What are y'all's thoughts about that side of the argument?
Well, I'm not against that. I think it's complementary to the prisons, but you don't do that and not build your prisons because again, I'm with these two guys that there's got to be consequences, and you can't offer a parenting class to somebody who's in there for aggravated robbery and hope that cures them. They need to go and serve the time. And John, I wanted to ask you this as well, if it's affecting you up there, but I can't right now. I'm so full, I can't hold misdemeanor violations. So there it's causing another problem as far as quality of life in my community when you can't arrest and take to jail these people that are shoplifting or public intox, things like that affect the day-to-day morale of your citizens. Because of the backup, it's a trickle-down effect that I think a lot of these counties we're all having to experience And again, without consequences for these bad choices, they will continue. And in my professional opinion, it will get worse.
Well, and you talk about general society being discouraged. You got law enforcement officers that are discouraged because they're out there picking people up, and they can't even get them to the jail because you have nowhere to put them, and so they release them or whatever the process
You give them
is.
a citation and send them on their way, and they're happy.
Right. Well,
The criminal's happy.
the criminal's happy,
Yeah,
not law enforcement or the
no,
citizen, but the
no.
criminal's happy because there's no fear of consequences for their actions, and no accountability for their actions, or if it is, it's minor compared to what they may do, which only, in my opinion, creates the avenue for it to become worse. And when you look at statistics, and you look at, like Little Rock was noted as being one of these reports that was put out, Little Rock being one of the worst capital cities in the nation for the highest crime rate. Once that mentality gets started out there in an area, it's kind of like a cancer. Once it gets started in one area, it doesn't stay there. It's going to spread out. We were talking earlier about, the spill out effect, that if you got an area where there's a high concentration of crime, it's not like the criminals are going to come to the county line and say, I can't. It's not like the old days where, you can't cross the county line. I think what they're doing is they're working their way out to the outlier areas, committing their crimes, and then they come back in
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
where they can find their safety. Go ahead.
Well, and let's talk about the scope of crime. Okay, the FBI statistics, the last ones I looked at, basically only 18% of property crimes, which Rodney was alluding to earlier, are cleared by an arrest. That means 82% of property crimes there's nobody even arrested. Less than 50% of violent crimes nationwide are ever cleared by an arrest. And so then the ones we do get arrested, and we can prosecute them because all the rules were followed and the evidence is clean, and we get them to trial, or they take a good plea. We've got to be able to keep the ones that we do catch in prison. If they're, we're not talking about everybody. I mean, I think it's important too for people to understand we're not out there getting jollies off of hurting people or trying to take everybody to prison. That's not it at all. It's a sobering responsibility. I mean, these are broken lives, but it's a responsibility that has to be carried out, or society in general is hurt. And so when we look at, one of the talking points against any of this is the cost associated with it. But Kim, nobody talks about the cost associated to mom and pop back home, our communities, for all of the crime that's being committed associated with that. It's astronomical. It's almost unquantifiable. And so it's government's first responsibility is public safety. And until we get that right, economic development, infrastructure, education, none of that has an opportunity to thrive until we get this right. And so this is government. It's a fundamental, and we've got to get it right.
Well, and then you take the impact of the businesses, and I know this has gotten attention of some of the Chamber of Commerce as well, because there are pockets that if they become high crime areas, and these are some areas that have been restored, if you have a high crime rate in that area, people are not going to go, which directly impacts the businesses that are dependent upon people feeling safe to come into the area. And when people don't feel safe going into an area, the businesses that are there are either going to leave, or they're going to become the victims of those that are looking to commit a crime because they know that that's an area that they can go in and do it. Got to take a break here in a second, but before I do, just any thoughts on this before we move on, any of this?
Well, something Cody just said about the way people feel about what we're doing as far as battling crime. Myself and Sheriff Montgomery, our responsibility is basically to the 98% of our citizens and population in our counties. And it's our job to make sure the 2%, if breaking the law, go to jail. And if you have a problem with that, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Don't live in Saline County and don't live in Baxter County.
Yep. And,
Amen.
And that reputation right there is what people want to know. Where is it safe to go and live?
Absolutely.
And where is it safe for my kids to walk around? And where is it safe for me to go to Walmart and not worry about getting, kidnapped or anything like that? All right, we got to take a break. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to the Kim Hammer Show. Again, if you want to go up to my website, which is thekimhammershow.com, I've got a list of some information that my research analysis has found, and she put up on my website. You can go up there and take a look at it. It's got a lot of information about crime statistics and information about crime. And again, you can listen to the podcast later if you can't complete the show today. But we hope you stick around. We'll be back after the break to the Kim Hammer Show. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for joining me here on a beautiful Saturday. My guests today are John Montgomery, who's the sheriff up in Baxter County, Rodney Wright, who's the sheriff in Saline County, Cody Hiland, who is the former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Arkansas, and also a former elected prosecutor in Faulkner County. So let me transition to something else, but when it comes to the percentage of the people that are impacted, what percentage would you say are out there just minding their own business, not bothering anybody, being obedient to the laws, versus the percentage of people that are the actual lawbreakers? And when you look at the statistics, some of which are up on my website that you can go and find, when you look at the bottom side of things, for example, I'm looking at Saline County right now, some of the highest percentage ones are aggravated assault, simple assault, something called intimidation. But when you get to the, what we might consider the more severe crimes like murder and negligent homicide, kidnapping, those things are on the smaller scale. The percentage of the population of those that are actually committing the crime is what percent, number one? And of that percent, what would you say represents the crimes of those that I just listed, if you had to ballpark it?
Well, I mean, I would say it's a very small percent of the ones that are actually committing crimes. And, and I don't know what the percentage is of the number of crimes that people commit. John, you may weigh in on this. I mean, by the time we catch them stealing or whatever they're doing, I mean, that's not the first time they've been doing it usually. And so they get away with it quite a bit before they get busted. So I think it's a pretty small percentage of the population in general that's committing the crime.
John?
I think Rodney's right. I think it's probably that 2%, 98% rule is probably pretty close. And but you're right, Cody. It is many times, and I've just happened to pull up our jail roster, and when you look at, here's someone's been in here. The person is 42 years old and has been in my jail 45 times. I'm sorry, they're not getting it. So at what point do we say, we've got to protect society Because, Cody, you hit the nail on the head. One of my big talking points all the time. We want to talk about cost, but we don't want to talk about the cost to the victim.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to piggyback on that, we had a guy named Skylar Carter that was a criminal in our area. And when we talk about predicting crime, I mean, Skylar's stock in trade was commercial burglary. And so he had been down 6 times on commercial burglary. And it had gotten to the point that our then police chief, A.J. Gary, who's now over emergency management, told his guys, Skylar was rotating out of prison. And when he did that, he told his guys, next time we get a commercial burglary alarm that goes off, don't respond to the location. You go to Skylar's residence. And so, sure enough, commercial burglary alarm goes off. They respond to his residence. 10 or 15 minutes later, here he comes tooling up the driveway with a truck full of TVs. And so, when we can kind of predict that with that kind of accuracy, it's not just the violent offenders. I mean, theft has a real impact on our community as well. And so we've got to be able to address that in some respect.
Well, and I don't want to minimize the, people that have been victims of the harder crime like murder, rape, and all that. But I'm looking at the statistical numbers on one of these reports, and the 3 areas that have the highest percentage of crimes being committed in them would be aggravated assault, simple assault, and intimidation. You go to counties that have higher populations, obviously you see the more violent crimes come up. But to the greater population that's being affected by the inability to place people where they can serve longer periods of crime, you're talking about the average working guy that's out there, and maybe we were victims of crime one time. We were building a house and somebody went in there and stole all the copper wire. We didn't have that in the budget.
Yeah.
And for what it cost me to replace it, or the cost of the insurance company to replace it, the percentage I would have had to pay to have a jail built that could have held somebody like that is far smaller than what I had to pay to replace what my insurance deductible didn't cover, or I'd had to pay out of pocket, which I really didn't have the money to do.
Yeah. Yeah, John, I don't know what your experience is, but when I was a local prosecutor, most of the complaints that I would get related to theft. Because again, when the threshold moved from $500 to $1,000, there's a lot of damage that can be done under $1,000 that has a real impact on our people, and there's not a lot of accountability for them under the law related to that.
Well, and we're on a border county, so we border Missouri. Yeah. And so, Cody, you'll know this, but a misdemeanor, even if we could charge them, if they live in another state, I can't go get them.
Yeah.
They have to be a felony. So when they raise that threshold, the hot checks, the minor thefts, they would come down here from bordering state in, steal, and go back home. It really put a damper. There's no question it hurt.
Is there no reciprocity between Missouri and us what is it that keeps you from being able to go across the line and be able to get them? It's a misdemeanor.
You can't extradite.
Has to be a felony.
So you've got an issue there on the felony. That's what killed us. If I can make one more quick point, Rodney, you talked about being not able to hold misdemeanors because you're full, and I get that. We used to be in that position, but here's the other part that I think is frustrating. So Baxter County had to spend several $1 million to expand our jail because we were full, over capacity, in large part because of the backup of people waiting to go to prison. Well, it's a little unfair that we had to spend all those millions of dollars to expand to hold the excess. We're losing about $30-some a day in what it costs to house an inmate that's supposed to go to prison, and yet the state doesn't step up to, in my opinion, what they need to do, which is build more prisons to take the pressure back off the counties.
What about warehouse prisons versus maximum security? Is there any, because how many of these, if the greater percentage is aggravated assault, simple assault, and intimidation, are those all maximum security criminal charges that would warrant sending them to maximum security?
Well, and I'm going to jump in here real quick. I'm going to tell you why I'm in favor of a maximum security, because, and again, I'm stepping off into an area that I'm not an expert in, but I do know they are having a major staffing problem trying to find guards to work in the areas that the maximum security prisons are in. They're old, they're outdated, they're worn out, they're escape risks. If they built a maximum security, it needs to be built somewhere else in the state where the workforce is there. Then and you could turn that prison into a lesser secure, more of a warehouse type stuff. Because again, I've toured these prisons. It's when you've got a 50% staff problem where you're only fulfilling 50% staffing, that's a major problem.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask, let's with the time we got left, let's kind of shift gear and talk about a couple other things. The solutions that have been tried before to help turn down crime that have not worked. What have you guys seen in real life on the streets, things that have been tried before that now with history and experience, because, a lot of times consultants come in or groups are hired to come in, they give their opinion about, well, this is what you need to do to turn down crime. Yeah, we try that. And this is kind of the point I'm to be honest with you. How long have we been trying this? What you've been telling us is supposed to have worked. Don't we have enough evidence now that what you've been telling us isn't working and we need to go a different direction? But when you got a segment of the population out there that may be small, but they're a loud segment, continue to beat that war drum, then how do you go about giving them real evidence? And you can even give personal examples, if you want to, that says, what you've been telling us ought to work ain't working.
Well, Kim, I believe that there's been studies. I agree. There's studies that show you should do this, you should do that. But there's been studies as far back as when I first became sheriff was in 2014 and before that said we need more prisons. So the study on needing more prison space has been going on for at least 7 years. And so it's not a new concept that we're bringing in 2022. This is something that was talked about in 2014 and before. And what I see is when we're getting parole papers for people and they're still in our jails, our county jails, they never even left our county jails, that's a problem. And then
the role of the prosecutor is to pursue justice.
Oh, go ahead, keep talking. That was a little sidebar, Blue.
Oh, that's okay. Again, it goes to we're letting people out before they should get out to put more people in. And like Cody said, the recidivism is so high. I mean, that's one of the broken.
Yeah, and I don't think you're going to hear anybody from our side suggest that, putting people in prison is the only approach to this. I mean, and John, you step in here, but, we understand that reentry is a big part of this. The first-time offenders, the diversionary programs, I mean, we've invested in those. I mean, Veterans Court, Drug Court, all those things are important. And so don't hear us saying that those things are not important. But really, the thing that's on fire in the state of Arkansas and in places in other parts of the country, it's the violent crime, and that's we've got to be realistic about what it is that drives that and what our response is going to be. I'm not in a position, John's not in a position, Rodney's not in a position to be able to stop somebody from killing somebody or burning a house down or whatever it is. We step in and respond to that. And so what is our response to that? And, Ronald Reagan used to talk about foreign policy. And what was his approach to foreign policy? It was peace through strength. And I think that doesn't just apply to foreign policy. It has to apply to public safety. And our job is to project strength for the people that we have sworn an oath to protect and serve. And so how do we do that? How do we get there? So the philosophy has to be right in the beginning, and then you look at implementation and what policies advance that principle. And so, but don't hear anybody saying that these other things aren't important. It's just that there are different segments. We haven't even touched on juvenile. I mean, juvenile, it's a huge issue. I know some of the gangs are recruiting some of these younger folks to be trigger pullers. And, we've got prosecutors in elections today, and we've got opponents, one at least funded by George Soros, another in Washington County that has said, look, I'm not gonna prosecute anybody, a juvenile as an adult, which is just absurd. It's destructive. And so we've got to get our philosophy right to begin with.
Well, I saw an article this past week, I think it was out in California, one of the elected prosecutors led to get a legislation change that they couldn't charge a juvenile as an adult for the crime. Yeah. They let that kid out because he was 2 weeks out from getting released. He got out, turned around, went out and violently raped somebody else.
Yep.
And then that prosecutor realized, who was a liberal Democrat, realized that may not be such a good idea. You know, and that's part of what I'm talking about. These ideas are like defunding the police, and I'm all about support services. I'm all about trying to help people change the direction that they're trying to go in life. I'm all about let's support that to a limit. But as John mentioned a while ago, you got somebody that's been arrested 45 times sitting in your
Yeah.
jail. That person doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And I don't know there's any amount of rehabilitation that that person can receive, given the fact that their history proves that's not what they want to do with their life.
Yeah. Until we embrace the reality of the situation. That's what, when I say elevating wishful thinking, I wish that we could just put people in prison for just a little while and they turn their life around
They never go back.
and never go back to it. Yeah. And it's just the reality is just not there. And it's not, we have to get away from this idea that society is responsible for people doing this. You know, Ronald Reagan talked about that. We've got to hold the individual responsible. And that's what we've got to get back to.
All right, let me ask John. Let me ask you and Rodney, from the front lines, recruitment of police officers. You know, I mentioned a while ago that I'm 100% for law enforcement. Actually, got an immediate family member in law enforcement, so 100%. What are the biggest challenges that you guys are seeing on the front line as far as the law enforcement being on the streets and actually, you know, arresting the criminals?
Go ahead, John.
Rodney,
I'll let you. I'll let you
well,
answer
I was
this.
gonna say, we're
both the
you know,
same.
we have noticed a big issue, just the sheer number of applications that come in for those positions. You know, used to, if we had an opening on for a deputy sheriff, or back when I worked for the city for a police officer, and you might have 25 or 30 applications coming in for everyone, because everybody wanted to be in law enforcement. With the attitude across the country and the fact that Arkansas ranks, was it 49th or 50th as far as pay for law enforcement? The pay, if you want to be a police officer, you want to be a police officer. I understand that, but you still have to feed your family. I can tell here we were able finally this year to get a substantial raise, which is still not anywhere near enough, but at least we're now starting to see applications come in. We went for 2 years and was not able to fill all of our positions. And so at least now we have, but pay is a big issue. And benefits, of course, is a big issue. And then it is frustrating because the mentality of, I can't remember if it was Cody or Rodney talked about, you know, when they're getting, before you get the ink dry on your paperwork, they're released from jail, or, you know, they serve 2 or 3 months in prison and get released. It's very frustrating to law enforcement.
Well, with the Arkansas State Police, I think in 2013, they received around 1,300 applications to be trooper. This last year for our troop school, we had 212. 212.
And the thing is, how many of those 212 are actually going to cut it?
We've got 21.
Yeah.
21.
And you got how many retiring out?
Oh, I don't know the exact number, but we're not keeping up.
No, that's the thing. You're not keeping pace, Rodney.
Well, and I'll echo what John said about recruiting as far as officers on the streets, but our jails are suffering. And I'll just tell you, I've got approximately 46 employees in my jail, and I'm down 17. I have 17 openings. I'm working my poor people to death, trying to keep up and work overtime, and we constantly keep that ad open, and we advertise on as many things as we can. We might get one application a month, you know, and so and we're being right here in Central Arkansas. We're competing against Pulaski County, Garland County.
You're
all the
competing
cities
against Amazon. is
Well,
who you're
Amazon.
competing
I lost one the other day to SIG over in Jacksonville.
against. Yeah.
So I mean, the private sector is paying really well, and so it's hard for me to find jailers that want to basically. I've got kids working in the jail. When I say kids, they're 18 and over, and they're babysitting adults, and it's hard to find.
And here, you know, and money is part of it. And they are working in an environment that, and I guess the question is, how much money would somebody have to make if we don't change the environment that they're working in? And that applies at multiple levels. That, you know, you could be making $250,000 a year at work for a corporation, but if your boss is sexually harassing you or whatever, there's not enough money to get paid to do that. I think we got to come at this thing, and maybe it was you, Cody, that used the illustration a while ago. You know, there's multiple prongs to this thing, multiple legs to the stool, if you would, that we've got to come in. It's got to be not only increase the capacity, it's got to be increase the pay. But if we don't change the environment while we do it, and it's almost like if we don't do all of them at one time, we're not going to get where we all want to get to.
No, I think that's right. And I think these guys would probably agree with me, but being the elected sheriff may be I think it's probably the toughest elected position in the state of Arkansas because of the jail and trying to find people to deal with the folks that they have to deal with. I mean, you wouldn't believe the stories coming out of the jails and what they have to deal with, spit on, and things that I won't even talk about on the radio, right? And it's tough. The salaries, and I don't know what the salaries are in their counties, but I know in Faulkner County it was difficult for the sheriff to find people to fill those spots and trust them, because we got to be able to trust these guys and ladies that do the job to do it well and not be compromised, because we had certain situations where, again, they're making really low pay, and so it's real easy for some of these bigger criminals to get in there and compromise some folks.
Well, and then you got the issue of agencies pirating from agencies. If you're the low man on the totem pole in law enforcement, you're the sheriff. If you're the low man on the totem pole and you go to work for a municipality and your officer can make $20,000 a year more, you're not only competing against Amazon and the private sector, you're also competing against other agencies that if people love law enforcement and they love what they do, they got to put food on the table just like everybody else does, and there are going to be a lot of transitional movement among the agencies.
Yeah.
You guys don't want to comment to that, I know. All right, we got a little time left. Let's go back to what you mentioned a while ago about juvenile, because we do have, like out at Alexander, you've got the juvenile lockup center, and then you got the situation, and now this is just Kim Hammer's opinion. You may be 16 years old, but if you go out and do the crime of a 38-year-old, in my opinion, you ought to be treated like the 38-year-old when it comes to the punishment. You made that choice. Some people would call me cold-hearted because, the environment that they raised up, the gangs snatched them, all these other things, and we're looking at pouring so much money into mental health. I don't know if we'll get to that today, but I know like over at the state hospital, the 301s, which, those are prisoners that have been deemed not competent to stand trial, correct me if I'm wrong, by the judge. So they get sent down to, state hospital, county jails. I think the last number I pulled, you guys have statewide, I think you got it's either 60 or 100, that are in the county jail that can't get to the state hospital, that maybe really need mental health services, not necessarily violent criminals, and we're working on getting a solution to that. But when it comes to the, juveniles, what do you guys see? Number one, some of the problems. Number two, some of the fixes.
Well, I think the juvenile question may be the most complex question, and I don't know that it's a hard question in the sense that government doesn't have the fix to everything, and I think one of the things we have to acknowledge is the breakdown of the family structure has resulted in a problem. I mean, I tell people all the time, if you come into my juvenile court when I was there, and you could see row after row of juveniles sitting there with their grandmother or their aunt or whoever, because mom and dad have checked out to satiate whatever immediate gratification is driving them at the time. Usually it's drugs. But those kids are angry, and they're bitter, and they're lonely.
Which is not their fault.
And it's not. But at the end of the day, they turn into the hardened criminal. And so we're kind of reaping a harvest of that. And so, but when it comes to, a sober public policy related to that, I think that, prosecutors have to, when you do have a juvenile that commits a crime that's eligible, and charge them as an adult and use your judgment on that. I think you've got to do that. The real danger is some of these prosecutors that are running, promising not to prosecute any juvenile as an adult. That's a recipe for disaster. But other things like extended juvenile jurisdiction, things like that. There are some things that, from a public policy standpoint, that we need to look at. Assessment tools, those kind of things. I know Judge Troy Braswell in the 20th Judicial District has done a fantastic job with the juvenile program up there. And so a lot of it's on the juvenile judges too, and making sure that they invest and they really dig into the problem and really work with these kids. And they almost become kind of a surrogate, parent in some ways in the juvenile court system for the kids that are coming through there. And the goal of juvenile court is rehabilitation. The goal is to turn them around before they become that hardened criminal. It's just that too many are slipping through the cracks and going the wrong way.
John, you got any comments? And let me ask you, up in Baxter County, the percentage of what you deal with that are juvenile related against the adult population, what would it be, and what are your thoughts?
Well, the juvenile, and again, the percentage is not super high, but Cody's right. If you could get that juvenile rehabilitated prior to, now again, perfect world, we rehabilitate everybody, juvenile, adult. That's not practical. So what I notice is, our files, the number of files that we have that come to our office as an adult, that they were once there as a juvenile. So in other words, we got two sets of files, if you will, on the same person, and so we see that a lot. And so I think Cody's right. If we, and I don't have the answer to how we can do a better job, maybe rehabilitating those juveniles, but a lot of those, I'll even go back to the school system. How many of those can't really read or write at high school level at all? And the parents, it's an inherent problem that I would say a large percentage of the juvenile cases we deal with, we have been dealing with the parents.
All right. I got to wrap it up. I'm coming in for the last minute. I'll give you all about 20 seconds each. Make a comment. Cody, I know it's hard for you, but 20 seconds.
Well, look, it's public safety is government's first responsibility. We've got to get it right. If we don't get it right, we have done a disservice to the people we serve.
My Sheriff, Rodney?
Absolutely. They've entrusted me with the security of Saline County, and if I don't push forward with stricter laws and better accommodations for them, then I'm not doing due justice for my citizens.
John?
Well, crime affects everything. It includes economic issues, et cetera. People want to come to your area, but they want to feel safe. The people who live in your area, they want to feel safe. So keeping people safe affects a whole lot of things in your community.
All right, you've been listening to the Kim Hammer Show. Before you tune off, let me just make a couple quick announcements. One, that's been John Montgomery, who is the sheriff up in Baxter County. Rodney Wright, who is the sheriff in Saline County. Cody Hiland, former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Arkansas and former elected prosecutor of Faulkner County. You can go up to my website, which is thekimhammershow.com, and you get a replay of this, or you can go out to one of the podcasts on any platform that you use. It should be able to be found out there along with the other shows that we've done in the past. I want to make sure that you know early voting has started. Early voting has started. And this is a Kim Hammer comment. Do you like the inflation? Do you like the fact that baby formula, one of the simple means of life for children, cannot be found, but yet it can be sent across to others to private own citizens? Do you like the fact that gas prices have hit $4? Do you like the fact that I had a guy the other day tell me I was going to go buy this, but I can't because I got to buy my food, I got to buy my gas, I got to pay my electric bill. Do you like the direction that we're going? Then you get out and vote. Make sure you vote right. Consider who we've got now in the leadership at the national level. And if you want that percolating down to the lower level, then vote on the right ticket and vote for those that are going to take us back to the freedoms that we all enjoy and get us back to the economy that we used to have. Go out and vote. Have a great day.